Welcome to Mastering Life's Adventures, an educational podcast about tapping into your true self, the soul, the substance of your life, to discover what life's ups and downs are really about, and how to have a greater sense of purpose, peace, joy, and fulfillment. I am Dr. Judith Holder, your host, coach, psychologist, fellow seeker who enjoys diving into the connections between spirituality, psychology, wellness, and your everyday life's adventures. All preparing and polishing you like the facets of a magnificent diamond to be your best self. If you're craving more from your life, you are in the right place. Come, let's journey together and transforming what you know into who you really are. Mastering Life's Adventures begins now.
Have you ever reacted to something small and later thought, why did I do that? It's as if you overreacted and then you said, what happened there? You didn't plan to snap. You didn't mean to shut down. You didn't want to send 3 emotional texts in a row, but something took over. And I'm curious about that. As I'm thinking about rewriting scripts, it's a continuing theme here, because I began last month to talk about love rewritten, and I'm interested in what that something is that snaps. Because I don't believe it's a weakness. What I do believe it is a trigger. And triggers, which we never think about, but triggers can be trained. I'm back with another episode for Soul Progress, and today the key is self-command. What we're going to be talking about is the underneath patterns, the underneath boundaries, the underneath overgiving. We're going to take a moment and think about where in the body the reaction is before your mind catches up. Because it happens so quickly, the body responds. And that's the trigger. When I feel that so quickly the body responds, it doesn't mean the mind can't either, but we're looking at this trigger mechanism that happens in the body. And here's what I want you to know from the beginning. A trigger is not proof you're immature. A trigger is proof something inside you still needs healing and authority. It still needs recognition. And sometimes it ends up being pushed aside, that thing that needs recognition. We're going to talk about that. And also the key is self-command that I'm talking about is not suppression. It's spiritual leadership over your emotional energy. Is spiritual mastery over your reactions that tend to take place. Let's define it simply. A trigger is an emotional reaction that is bigger than the moment. It's when a late text feels like abandonment, or a short tone feels like rejection, or delay feels like betrayal, or a disagreement feels like danger, and suddenly you react, or you shut down, or you chase, or you withdraw. And here's why. Your nervous system stores memory. And when something in the present resembles something painful in the past, your body reacts first. Your body knows, it's like muscle memory. It's just there and it knows what to do when certain things come up. And so that reaction is usually fast, feels very real, and feels urgent. But it isn't always true. And here's the spiritual layer that I want you to be aware of. Energy that is not governed will govern you. We have to learn the self-mastery, gain the self-mastery over what goes on internally as well as externally, or things that we have control over. And self-command, and how I'm thinking about it, means your emotions are powerful, but I am their steward. I am the person who makes the choices about what happens to that emotional energy. And sometimes because these reactions or these triggers happen so quickly, we don't feel like we have control over them. I'm going to give you another way of thinking about it. Let's break these into 3 common responses. And I'll give names to the people. The first response is the overreactor. And let's say this is Lena. Lena grew up in a home where she had to defend herself verbally. Now, when her partner says something slightly critical, Lena doesn't just respond, she escalates. For example, her boyfriend may say, "Did you forget to call the landlord?" Lena hears, "You're irresponsible." She snaps, "Why are you always on me? I handle everything." 10 minutes later, she feels bad. What happened? Her nervous system linked criticism with attack. So she attacked first. And what she's learning at a soul level is discernment. Because not every comment is a threat. And emotional power must be directed, not detonated. Number 2, the shutdown response. This is Emily. And when I talk about shutdown, it's more like a freeze response. Either freezing, that deer in the headlight type of look, or it's literally shutting down. Wanting to move away from the situation. So Emily hates conflict. And if you do too, you may raise your hand. I think there's a lot of people who do not like conflict. If someone raised their voice, even slightly, her body goes quiet. And our partner says, "Can we talk about what happened yesterday?" Just a simple comment like that. What Emily says is, "It's fine," and emotionally disappears. Her heart races, her throat tightens. She tells herself she's being calm, but she's actually frozen. And her trigger says conflict equals danger. So she avoids it. And what Emily is learning at a soul level is being courageous. Courageous. Because intimacy requires staying present with discomfort when it arises. And so you have to have that courage. You have to give that boldness to say, "I'm going to be fully here. I'm not going to shut down. I'm not going to give a statement that I don't like conflict, therefore, I'm not going to stay around." That's not the soul path. That's not the soul lesson that needs to be learned here. And I'll talk a little bit more in a minute, but I want to talk about this third type of energy or trigger, which is the chaser. And the chaser is dealing with anxious response. And this is Natalie. Natalie feels connected when communication is frequent. And if her partner goes quiet for a few hours, Natalie in her mind feels in the blanks. She sends, "Are you okay? Did I do something? Why are you distant?" Then he responds casually, and this is her partner, and she feels relief. But the pattern repeats. Her trigger says distance equals abandonment. Quietness equals abandonment. So she closes the gap fast. But the soul lesson to be learned here is trust, because real security cannot be forced through urgency. So each one of these types of issues or triggers that come up are helping the soul to evolve in a particular way. So if it's the overreactor of Lena and the fight response that takes place, and she's kind of learning how to discern what you need to kind of move forward in and what you don't need to move forward in. And then you have Emily, who has the shutdown response and freeze response type of energy or behaviors that take place. And what she's learning is courage, not to shut down, but to engage. And then there's Natalie, and she's the chaser. That's an anxious response. And what she's learning there is trust, and not feeling the need to fill the gap so quickly, trusting herself and understanding that she doesn't have to get anxious because she doesn't hear what another person says, or is not uncertain whether there is a connection between that person and her. And the reason why these particular triggers that I just talked about may feel so powerful at times, I think it's good to give you an analogy. Imagine your body is a smoke detector. Sometimes it goes off because there's real fire. And sometimes it goes off because you burnt toast. A trigger is the alarm. Self-command is checking the stove before calling the fire department. Without self-command, you live reacting to smoke that isn't always fire. And here's the deeper teaching. Your soul is meant to self-command. Your soul is meant to command energy, not to be commanded by it. It needs to be in the driver's seat. So let's talk about this in a different way. I think I'm going to say Vanessa was dating Chris. And one evening she sent him a message. Hours passed, no reply. Vanessa's chest tightened and thoughts rushed in. He's losing interest. I said something wrong. This always happens. And she almost sent a long emotional message, but she paused. She remembered this phrase: pause is power. And we need to have little phrases to ourselves to slow down the triggers so that we can make wise choices. And so what she remembered was this phrase: pause is power. Instead of reacting, she practiced self-command. That's a quality of self-command, by saying, pause is power, remembering that. Have a little word or statement that comes up for you that allows you to do 3 things as you're trying to practice self-command. The step 1 is name it. This is the trigger. Step 2, breathe once slowly. And step 3, ask, what is actually happening? The fact was simple. He hadn't replied yet. That's the fact. No betrayal, no abandonment, no proof of rejection, just space. And we have to realize we project our anxiety, our fear, our uncertainty onto other individuals. And it is up to us to gain mastery over those types of reactions or those types of triggers. And this is why I'm talking about self-command. Self-command, being observant of yourself and asking yourself those questions to see if it's running amok in terms of your thinking or if it's true. So she could say, these are the facts, that he has not responded. And there is just space. Okay. But what our minds tend to do is rush to make certain conclusions. But what Vanessa did instead was waited. And 3 hours later, you know what Chris said? Sorry. Back-to-back meetings. So we can expend a whole lot of energy on these triggers that go off inside of us. when things are not going the way we think they should. But sometimes what we need to do is slow it down, see the facts as they are, and be present. He just gave a simple statement, and it's true. Haven't you ever been in back-to-back meetings and you don't have time to respond to things or to texts or even emails at times? So there is that trusting of yourself and allowing things to unfold the way they need to, as opposed to the way that you would want them to be. And his statement, nothing dramatic, but something dramatic did happen inside Vanessa. She realized my reaction was louder than reality. And when we can realize that our reaction is louder than reality, we're on the right track. Because we can become curious and we can be able to see, okay, what happened? Why now? And start to retrain that energy that is coming up in oneself. So she's learning to take on self-command, because emotional maturity begins when you separate feeling from fact. And you maybe say, okay, but how do you build that? What do you need to do? I may do some of that already. Well, I would invite you to 3 things. The first is a 90-second rule. When triggered, do nothing for 90 seconds. Let the body wave pass. You are not ignoring the feeling. You are preventing escalation. Number 2, the fact versus story test. And what you need to do is ask, what are the facts? What story am I adding? Because that's what happens. There's filters by which we're seeing the facts by, and we need to observe and see what they are. Here's the fact, and here's the story. For example, the fact is, he hasn't replied. The story was, he's pulling away. So what happens is that we take maybe a fact and make a story up about it. That's not going to serve you. Separate them and use self-command sentences. Instead of reacting, say, I need a moment before I respond. Or, I want to think about that. That is powerful, not weakness. So what we're learning how to do is to break things down. As you walk a spiritual path and you're attuned to your I am presence, you're attuned to your Christhood, you're attuned to your soul. And that means in the process of taking those pauses, it allows you to speak to you and give you greater discernment and intuition and understanding and patience in situations that it is not your human self trying to drive control. It is your Christic soul self that is working at a particular pace and waiting. And that does require for us sometimes to do self-soothing qualities or techniques or behaviors or thoughts or feelings that allow us to calm ourselves down. So the 3 types of practical tools you could use is the 90-second rule, the fact versus story test that you're asking yourself, and the self-command sentences that you can give to yourself that allows you to look at things and respond in a different way instead of reacting. And that self-command, once again, what you're trying to say is, I need a moment before I respond. That's when you have a trigger go off in you, that makes complete sense. Or, I want to think about that because maybe you need to take some time and reflect on, what went on there? And what were the circumstances, the people, and the situations that I know this coming up in me? And that's power, not weakness, as I said earlier. So one of the things that with these triggers that go on, it's easy to shut down. It is. Because we're annoyed at ourselves, we're annoyed at the situation, we feel a little bit maybe out of control which we're talking about here and now, is self-command. So think about this. This is Rachel. She grew up in a loud home. Conflict meant chaos. But in adulthood, when her partner raised his voice slightly, she shut down. And one day he said, "Why do you disappear when we argue?" That stung. But it was true. See what? Rachel would just disappear. And the next time the tension rose, Rachel tried something new. Her body wanted to freeze. Instead, she said, "My body is reacting right now. I'm not leaving this conversation. I just need to breathe." And that one sentence changed everything. She didn't run. She stayed. So what Rachel and all of us are learning in order to reduce some of these triggers that go off in us is presence. Because staying emotionally available during discomfort is a mark of inner mastery. That we can have these difficult conversations or these emotional charged situations go on, but how do we stay balanced and centered in ourselves and centered in the presence of God, the I am presence, Atman, soul, whatever you want to call it, but that spiritual something more that allows us to sit in grace while we're dealing with a particular conflict or a difference of opinion. We're willing to stay fully present. So triggers are not enemies. They are initiations. And every trigger reveals where fear still lives, where trust is thin, where old wounds still speak. And here's the teaching. The Christ nature within you is calm authority, is calm presence. It is calm in knowing who you really are. And that is a soul evolving on a planet Earth to grow, to advance, learn from all situations, bad, good, or indifferent, and continuing to walk in a spiritual way. It does not react from panic. When you're walking in a spiritual way, you're Christ-centered in your nature with a calm authority, a calm presence. It does not lash out. It does not chase. It does not get so anxious in terms of the reaction. Instead, what it does is leads. It leads through self-command. So maybe sometimes you have to say, I feel this, but I choose my response to be this over here. And that's not, weird. It is. We can acknowledge the fact that you can feel one way and you can choose a different behavior. That's self-command. That you're commanding it to move in the direction that is harmonious, that is helpful, that will guide you to make better choices. Remember, something I've talked about a little bit in the past in different ways, but remember this. Overreacting equals needs discernment. You need to look at it. From overreacting, what's up? What's going on here? Shutting down, it means that there may be something you need to be more courageous around. Pulling out the courage card. And if it's chasing, it may be something that you have to garner and learn in terms of trust. Trusting yourself and signing the fine-tuning of that trust in yourself. And all three need one thing. You hear me say it, but I will say it again. Self-command. Because freedom is not the absence of triggers. Freedom is leadership in the presence of them. This is what love looks like when it is practiced. This is where the soul grows, right in the middle of real life. I'd love to hear from you, your thoughts about this self-command. And also, which triggers do you recognize most in terms of overreacting or shutting down or chasing? And please feel free to share this for other people that you may find that it would be helpful to them. And also, you can find me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on YouTube as well. And lastly, I want to say is that we all can learn how to engage in self-command just by observing ourselves, just by being curious, just by not taking ourselves so seriously that it ends up that it makes us sad, depressed, mad, or anxious. No, we just see it for what it is and be curious about it. And then think about, how do I want to show up in a different way? And how can I begin now? That allows you to move into retraining those old patterns, those old impulses and triggers, into what you wish to be. And that is fully present, walking a spiritual path, and being your best self. Something to think about. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining me for this episode on Mastering Life's Adventures, being your best self through soul evolution. If you have enjoyed what you've heard today, I would be delighted if you would share this episode with others, leave a thumbs up, and subscribe to my Mastering Life's Adventures podcast. Look forward to your joining the next episode. Please leave any comments or suggestions you might have below. Bye for now.